Hello and welcome back to Radio 2. So today we're continuing with storytelling. We had quite a long lesson in the previous one, so lecture 35, where we spoke about storytelling in detail, and we gave a lot of techniques as to how you can become a better storyteller. Okay, so today we're continuing with storytelling, and today we're using Next Level Radio. So if you want to follow along with what we'll be looking at today, it's from page 160 up until page 164 for today's lesson. So in the previous lesson, we said that human beings love stories. We learn through them from the time that we are children, and we continue the tradition as adults. Most people find it very hard to resist a good story. If well told, they make us laugh, they entertain us, they teach us about life, and importantly, they remind us about our humanity. Long before the printed word, every culture on earth passed down its vital information, its ethics and morals, through storytelling, through myths and parables. Best-selling books, movies, television, and live entertainment are all based on great stories and great storytelling. So that's something that Valerie Geller said in Beyond Powerful Radio with regards to storytelling. So what does that mean in essence? It reminds us that we are all born to listen to stories. We all love a great story and are always drawn almost instinctively to those that have the ability to tell them superbly. Almost all great radio presenters have two definite things going for them. Firstly, they have an easy to understand, relatable and emotive character map or profile. And secondly, they are great storytellers. So we've previously looked at link formatics, and we looked at the elements of storytelling, which is the hook, the crumbs, the dress up, the payoff, and the blackout. So when we go through this section on storytelling, the same as within the previous class, it's important to remember these rules. Presenters need to work hard at perfecting all the practical examples provided, okay? If you are to become a great storyteller yourself. Emma Coates, who's a storyboard artist from Pixar, who also works for Disney movies, who worked on Disney movies like Brave, has written extensively about storytelling. She's named a series of principles that we're going to look at now from the perspective of writing and performing stories for radio. You admire a character more for trying than for their successes. From a radio perspective, this can be seen as twofold. So firstly, make your stories have a character that's trying to succeed. And secondly, presenters must make themselves as vulnerable as possible in front of their audience. Make listeners believe that you as a presenter are just like them, and they too are striving for the same successes and trying to avoid the same failures. There's 6 different ways in which you as a presenter can make yourself vulnerable. First and foremost, listening is the most important part of becoming vulnerable. Actively listen to listeners, clients, co-hosts, and managers while watching their body language and being open to non-verbal communications around you. We spoke about how important listening is 2 lectures ago as well, when we spoke about interviews and just how important it is to listen and to listen to what is not being said while taking in body language. Okay, so listening is the most important part of becoming vulnerable. Number 2, while you are on the air, if something fits your character profile and you're thinking it, then say it. Okay. Number 3, be intimate and personal by finding ways to share personal experiences with your listeners. Number 4, share your emotions. Tell your listeners how you are feeling about a topic, not only what you are thinking. Number 5, show vulnerability and show self-deprecation. Lastly, number 6, place the focus on your listeners. Ask them to share your experience by asking, you know when, or have you ever? Okay, so that's the first step, just to make yourself vulnerable, and obviously these are the examples of how to do it. So if we look at Emma Coates' second principle, you have to keep in mind what is interesting to you as an audience, not what is fun to do as a writer. These two things can be very different. Always put the listener front and center of every radio conversation. Remember both the flow and interaction that we've previously spoken about. So when you are having a conversation with your co-host, then you are not talking to your presenter. So you need to talk to your presenter so that it can flow back, okay? Remember that flow and interaction. Also make sure that the content is relevant and relatable. And then number 3, trying for theme is important, but you won't see what the story is actually about until you're at the end of it. Now rewrite. What on earth does that mean? What am I referring to there? Many radio presenters, because of the sheer volume of creative work that they have to churn out, become stuck on delivering only their first ideas. Write the story, then rewrite the story, making sure it becomes the best version of itself. So don't always settle for the first version. Number 4, once upon a time there was beep, there was X. Every day, X. Because of that, X. Because of that, X. Until finally, this is a fantastic template to use when writing a radio story specifically. Especially when it comes to personal stories that relate to a presenter's character on air. Start with the history of the story, then progress to how the event impacts on the presenter's everyday and how, because of this factor, there's a conflict or a dilemma. Lastly, tell the story of how it's finally resolved. Very important. Number 5, simplify, focus, combine characters. Hop over detours. You might feel like you are losing valuable stuff, but it sets you free. Okay, so in essence, keep the story simple, concise, and engaging. Number 6, what is your character good at or comfortable with? Whatever it is, throw the polar opposite at them. Challenge them. How do they deal? Every character in a story needs to be challenged. This is because a story needs conflict or dilemma. In the previous lesson, when we spoke about HeadQuest, he called this the obstacle. The obstacle does not always start out as being one, but it moves between a journey and the goal, a journey toward the goal. This can be done from safety to danger or from the known to the unknown. The challenge is what prevents the protagonist achieving its goal. It's the problem, the dilemma, or the question. It may be another person, something physical to be overcome, or something to be learned. Often it might be an internal challenge. This conflict makes the story worth telling gives a drama, and makes the comedy work. Number 7, come up with your ending before you figure out your middle. We also mentioned this in the previous lecture. Start with the payoff. Because starting with the ending will shape your entire story. The reality is, if you don't know where you're going, you are more likely to wander around, making the story boring and unengaging. Number 8, finish your story. Let it go, even if it isn't perfect. As radio presenters, writers, and producers, you are continuously creating content, okay? You are always going to be busy finding new content pieces, creating new content pieces. Don't get stuck on a piece that wasn't perfect. You get better the more you write and the more you tell stories, okay? So give it time. Number 9, when you are stuck, make a list of what won't happen next. A lot of times, the material to help you get unstuck will show up this way around. This is a fantastic way of brainstorming the crumbs, which is the middle piece of the story. Number 10, pull apart stories that you like. What you like in them is a part of you. You've got to recognize it before you can use it. Do you remember in the previous class, I asked you to Google Paul Harvey and to find a story that you like of his and to think about why it is that you like the story of his. And this is why. Because when you take that story of his that you like, I need you to pull it apart to see what it is of it that you like, because what you like in the story is a part of you, okay, which you need to recognize before you can use it. This will help you find yourself. This will also help you tell your truth and doing so in a way that really matters to the audience. Number 11. Putting it on paper allows you to start fixing it. If it stays in your head, a perfect idea, you will never share it with anyone. So the whole idea is that you need to take your thoughts and put it onto paper, okay, for you to be able to use it. Number 12, discount the first thing that comes to mind, and the second, the third, the fourth, the fifth. Get the obvious out of the way. Surprise yourself. This point is so important to radio presenters. It reiterates that great stories come from hard work. Many presenters present the first thing that comes to mind, okay? It's just one of those things. This is sheer laziness. Don't simply work on the first thing that you have. Rework that first story. Get a new angle to it, okay? Before bringing it back. Then number 13, give your characters opinions. Passive or malleable might seem likable to you as you write, but it's poison to the audience. Strong opposing opinions are gold on radio. Presenters should use these in storytelling whenever they can. Number 14, why must you tell this story? What is the belief burning within you that your story feeds off of? That is the heart of it. If the presenter or the storyteller, if you as the presenter or the storyteller has no emotional connection to the story, neither will your listener. Make sure that your story feeds off of the emotional connection and make sure that it's told in a way that brings out that emotion. Number 15, if you were a character in this situation, how would you feel? Honesty lends credibility to unbelievable situations. So make your audience want to care, to feel something for your story. People are overloaded with way too much information as it is. If you evoke emotions, people will pay attention and remember the message that you want to convey for longer. Number 16, what are the stakes? Give us reason to root for your character. What happens if they don't succeed? Stack the odds against, okay? Stack the odds against them. This is also true for presenters' characters, not only for stories. If you as a presenter can get listeners on your side and can get listeners rooting for you, then you are creating emotional bonds that cause listeners to tune in and always try to be involved in your life as a presenter. As the old saying goes, no personal conflict, no story. Number 17, no work is ever wasted. If it's not working, let it go and move on. It will come back around to be useful later. Then number 18 there. So there's always another link, okay? Always another opportunity and another space to use content in radio. Number 18, you have to know yourself. The difference between doing your best and fussing. Story is testing, not refining. This again refers to presenters understanding themselves, okay, and their characters. So knowing yourself and knowing exactly what it is that you stand for. Number 19, coincidences to get characters into trouble are great. Coincidences to get them out of trouble are cheating. Don't be lazy when it comes to creating stories, okay? So don't write a coincidence to get your character out of trouble. Although brevity is important, loopholes in the story can be fateful and must be plugged. Number 20, exercise. Take the building blocks of a movie that you dislike. Number 20. Okay, so this one is an exercise for you. Take the building blocks of a movie that you dislike. How can you rearrange them into what you do like, into something that would be a movie that you like? Presenters should do extra work on their craft. This is similar to a professional sportsman only playing games and never putting in the time on the practice field. Sportsmen know the importance of training and practicing. Radio people should learn to do the same. So this quote provides a great exercise for starting this process. Another exercise could be taking the building blocks of a radio show or link or a podcast that the presenter dislikes. Another exercise could be taking the building blocks of a radio show or a link or a podcast that you dislike, and then rearranging them into what you think will make a great link or a great show. So that's another way of thinking about it. Number 21, you've got to identify with your situation or characters. You can't just write cool. What would make you act that way? The more authentic the story and the storyteller, the better the chance of succeeding. Number 22 there, what is the essence of your story? The most economical telling of it. If you want that, If you know that, you can build it out from there. Every great radio story is usually quite clear and concise. Listeners should be able to repeat the story and the ideas in the story almost word for word. What we're going to do now is I'm going to show you, we're going to listen to another one of Paul Harvey's storytelling, of Paul Harvey's stories. Okay, and I want you to see what it is that you think really works in the story. Which of these elements that we've discussed in the last two lessons, so the previous one and this one, does he make use of? Why is it that these stories are seen as great storytelling? Okay, so let's quickly take a listen to this short story called Henry Steinway.
Hello, Americans. I'm Paul Harvey. You know what the news is. In a minute, you're going to hear the rest of the story. The rest of the story. When the 19th century was young and Henry was only 8, the French invaded Germany. The boy's father and 3 older brothers joined the German army to defend their homeland. The rest of the family remained in Wolfshagen. And yet there and then, the battlefront and the home front often blurred. For after the men in the house had left to engage the French in some distant battle, the enemy overran and occupied Henry's hometown. He and his mother and young brothers and sisters had to flee into the mountains. And through that terrible cold winter, the civilian family slowly perished, some from exposure, others from starvation. By spring, the only one left was little Henry. Not long after the little boy wandered down from the frigid mountains, his father and 3 remaining brothers, home from soldiering, found him. When the war was over, Henry's father returned to his former employment as a forester in the lush woodlands of the Duke of Brunswick. And all 4 brothers worked at their father's side. And the father never stopped reminding Henry that his survival through that harsh winter in the mountains was very much a miracle, that his youngest son had been spared for some purpose, though he knew not what. This is the rest of the story. Now the year is 1812. Henry is 15. His 3 older brothers are laboring in the countryside with their father, and one minute the sky was blue, and the next there was a terrific clap of thunder. The foresters looked up to see black storm clouds looming on the horizon, rolling in fast. The father and 4 brothers and 2 other workers took refuge in a nearby shelter. Suddenly the rain's coming down in an opaque wall of water, and then a flash of light, and later, after the storm had passed, woodsmen discovered the smoldering rubble. The shelter had been incinerated by the lightning bolt. The bodies of the foresters who had huddled there lay lifeless in the ashes. The woodsmen counted 7, all of them dead. Or so they thought. But one of them only stunned had survived. And yes, that one was 15-year-old Henry. Henry is now utterly orphaned and utterly penniless. He would have to make his own way in the world. But no matter how hard the times got, he remembered what his father had told him, that his life had been spared for a purpose. And after all that had happened, who could deny it? For indeed, the boy one day became a man, and the man one day became a maker of musical instruments, one whose name is revered even unto this day. You see, the essence of Henry's monumental accomplishments in life is the destiny attached to them. For once upon a time, there was a child who lost his entire family twice, and who was himself rescued from almost certain death twice, and who battled the odds to break new ground and set a new standard as a creator of the world's finest pianos. You would recognize Henry only by his last name, Steinway, the young forester who eventually taught the trees to sing. Now you know the rest of the story.
Okay, so that is one story. Harvey was a brilliant storyteller, and there are a lot of stories out there that you can go and listen to get more of a feel for what he did. He used news as content to weave personality into the homes of millions of American people multiple times each day. So he delivered current topical news and commentary with personality and perspective. His content was always on point for his personality profile, but it was his ability to tell stories that made him such a well-known and well-liked personality. Paul Harvey, on a daily basis, would skillfully weave stories together, transitioning from one to the next. He would express personality through his choice of words without getting in the way of content at all. You could feel his perspective through his delivery. He varied his pace to add drama. He used his voice as a weapon. He used benchmarks as hooks, okay? Because obviously we all know about how important it is to utilize those hooks. He made use of benchmarks as hooks. In the rest of the story, which is his overall story segment, Harvey demonstrates the full range of his amazing storytelling skills. And he was a master at hooking the audience quickly, okay? It's very clever, subtle, and it provokes curiosity. So he gets you hooked. And then once you're hooked, it's pretty much impossible to tune out. He builds his stories with color and drama and detail. His words engage us to play along, and this leads to the reveal. Paul Harvey has passed away in 2009 already, so he hasn't been around for quite a while. This is just one example of how important it is to utilize prep, to prep your stories, and to use the techniques and tips from the previous lesson and this lesson within your stories to try and get the best out of them. So just lastly, quickly to recap. Storytelling is one of the key points in the proven creating powerful radio or powerful communicators process. Focus, engage, opinion or position, and storytelling. Storytelling is used to entice the listener. It has been taught since childhood. We've all had stories since we were kids. There are no boring stories, only boring storytellers. The basics of storytelling is the who, the what, where, when, why, and how, along with the beginning, the middle, and the end. However, the way the story is told with personality and tailoring it to the audience is the key to being a powerful storyteller. Stories reflect the basic themes of human nature. So good versus evil, right versus wrong, humor, love, life's absurdities, triumph against all odds, rags to riches or riches to rags. And lastly, stories that succeed are about character, and they inspire, they give hope, teach, and move the members of the audience. Please do me a favor and go through the notes again. Go through the PowerPoint slides of lecture 35 and this one, lecture 36 again. Make sure you understand all of the elements, why they are so important to be utilized, what their functions are, okay? So that we can start building on your stories to start getting you to that point of providing the best stories possible. And with that, I say goodbye for now until our next lesson. Bye.